where there is already a tennis court. So that was just something that just so everybody can be updated on the previous Parks and Rec conversation, that there is a lot of desire for this community to have a pickleball court. So we want to make sure that even if the pickleball court does not go into Grabhorn, that it's definitely a desired amenity for the community. So it will be addressed. Would anybody else like to speak regarding the pickleball court? Great, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so we, the city was able to meet with the school district and begin discussions regarding school fields. So tonight we have Dave Suka to discuss the main points of that initial conversation. So Dave, you have the floor.
Okay, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. So my disclosure is that I didn't know I would be giving a report on that meeting, so I don't have thorough notes and things to present to you. However, I will go through the history of that meeting. It falls on the heels of the work session that the school district and the city council had here semi-recently. And this meeting was called, I believe in theory, by interim manager Alex Rains and Megan Grayson. And I did sit in on it and ended up being very involved in the conversations. And what was interesting from this conversation is that the school district seemed a little taken back by some of the needs that they were starting to hear, because these needs hadn't really been expressed to them. They basically had said that people hadn't really come forward asking for much use of the field. So that was interesting to them, I guess, was one of the takeaways from it. Another takeaway is that they're very open to working with the community to try to meet needs for the youth programs as well as their school programs. They wanted to point out to us is that those young athletes is their pool for high school athletes. And so they stressed that they were very supportive of helping those younger groups, be able to flourish. So, I mean, that in a highlight, that was kind of where we went. There was a comment I noticed in the Parks and Rec about the properties. There was some light discussion about future involvement and partnership between the school district and the city, whether they do have property available to look at, creating some sort of a partnership with the city. Nothing was spoken in detail. This is at the very early stages of discussions, but both parties were definitely excited to have future conversations about that once there's a more defined need, and whether that's all groups, all of the youth athletic groups come together and we all just basically sit at one big round table or however that format is and talk about what those needs are collectively as a community, rather than individually. So in a nutshell, that was about it. I can try to answer questions if there are any. That's kind of my report, I guess.
Thank you, Dave. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, Dave. So is there next steps, or is there a planned structure on how you're going to proceed?
At the conclusion of that meeting, there was no set dates. There was just the interest by all parties to move forward with that. But no next meeting has been established. This meeting was only back on the 9th. It was fairly recent. And with the community's involvement with the Centennial, it kind of took precedence over everything. So now we can get back to business as usual, and get that scheduled.
Who was it with again? I'm just sorry. Was it the old school board, or was it actual schools, or?
I don't know all of them personally, but Tim Porter was there, and Mitch, the finance administrator, the athletic director I met. There was 3 other folks that I'm not overly familiar with all of the school district folks, but there was 6 or 7 of them represented.
Okay, thanks.
Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my recommendation would be that as the Parks and Rec Committee begins to pivot to looking at the master plan, maybe we can look at some models for how there have been, city school district collaboration. And I know, Paul, you had circulated, I think it was City of Santa Barbara, had like kind of a compact, like a formalized compact, where there was just mutual agreement that, these are public assets. And so how do we look at making sure that these public assets are serving the community in the best ways, regardless of who's in charge of managing them? So I would say, maybe I would put forward a recommendation that we just do like an informal work group, kind of how we tackled some of the, work streams for this effort here. And we look at some good models for that.
Good. Thank you, Kim. Do we have any other
Kara,
questions?
this is Megan.
Hey, Megan.
Hi. Piggybacking off of Kim's comment, I had spoken with Dave earlier, and I feel like it's going to take a lot from the city side to continue pushing this conversation with the school district. And so whether that's approaching the school board, just saying, hey, we're here to continue the conversation. These are some things we'd like to continue talking about or look into, whether it's maintenance fees or who's tending to your fields, who has access to your fields. Not that it's necessarily the school board's work to do this, but just so they have a pulse that this is important to us and that we will continue the conversation. And I think it's so instrumental that the Parks and Rec Committee is involved in that, as well as all of the youth rec sports and high school, middle school organized sports, as well as, potentially Dave, et cetera. So again, I feel like this is kind of an initiative that we need to, as a city and a community, continue to push the school district on.
I think that we are motivated to continue this conversation from our standpoint. So I think we will definitely show up for all of this.
This is a question for Megan and also for Dave and for Kara. Do you feel that maybe a subcommittee that was comprised of, maybe the Parks and Rec, maybe some people from the school district, maybe some people from the city, to basically formalize a meeting structure and then get a procedure going and try to move forward? Do you think that would be a good idea, or is it too early to talk about that?
What are your thoughts? I'd be curious hearing your thoughts, Dave and Megan.
Go ahead if you want.
Oh, no, I definitely think that something more formalized is needed. I won't be as kind as Dave was. I was honestly, I'll be honest, a little frustrated during some of the points that we were talking about with this group. Looking into ADA accessibility on the 6th Street and High School Way piece. It didn't seem like they had even looked into things, or they were dismissing certain suggestions. And I really do think it would take a committee to have someone initiate some of these. Let's focus on the fields or all the assets that we have in the community. Who's in charge of them? What does that look like in terms of maintenance? How do we get, each piece to the next level or accessible to the community? And I do think that it would take some sort of a group that is willing to keep it going, for sure.
Okay. All right.
So I would just kind of, to follow up on that, I mean, maybe it is looking at some of the different models that collaboration models that have been used in the cities, previously, to say, hey, here's a range of options, right? How we can pursue this, how this might work from a collaboration perspective. And maybe that's the jumping off point. And then formalize, what's going to work best for our community around, all the different options we consider.
Yeah, what Kim is referencing is, Kim is referencing that I found a number of documents from larger cities, San Diego, Seattle, and then much smaller towns that also had these same basically understandings, agreements between the school district and the city. So that'd be a good place to start for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
We might just be able to put that on a matrix, right? Like, you know, what's the size of the city, kind of, you know, how did where was their alignment, you know, who all was involved in putting that together, and just kind of like map that out. And then we can kind of plot, you know, how does it fit for our community?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, I think that really this should be one of our very first tasks as soon as we get back to full Parks and Rec committees. I think it's important. I think it's worthwhile, and I think it will benefit the majority of SCAPUS. Spend time on this.
It'll potentially solve a lot of problems that some of the groups have been facing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's an encouraging response.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much, Dave and Councilor Greisen, for showing up to speak regarding those topics. I appreciate you guys taking the time.
You know, if anything, if I can chime in just here one last second, if anything, you know, this is the first one of these meetings I've been invited to, but I've been kind of following the things that you guys have been talking about. And one thing that seems to be just shaking out of this whole thing is the inevitable need to update the parks master plan. And it sounds like that these sports fields are going to be a key component of that update to that plan. So I just think that that's a logical, really next step for the city as a whole, is just to sit down and go through that master plan and the newly acquired properties and just reestablish the vision for the community and what direction we want to go as a whole. So that's my closing, I guess, takeaway from it.
Absolutely. And that is I believe it's in the works. Well, you can comment on that.
So a Parks Master Plan is not currently in this current fiscal year's budget, but I'm certain it's going to be a serious topic for consideration as the city begins building the budget for the following fiscal year, early next year.
Thank you, Hugh. Em, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say as an action item, so this kind of doesn't get lost and deferred to the next meeting, could we maybe as a Parks and Rec committee circulate an email to begin to get some volunteers that would maybe be on a work group to look at some of the, you know, other model communities that have a collaboration, and we can start to get that rolling?
Yes, we can do that.
My comment on this, on the Parks Master Plan, because I've read it dozens of times. The Parks Master Plan really is based on, you know, many things: population, size of the city, how many acres we currently have, what our growth plans are. It didn't really take into account sports needs. That was it did an inventory of fields, but it was that was kind of lacking with regards to, you know, the sports needs of the community. So I think we really, you know, cracked open the egg around the sports needs. We're finding more and more, you know, the softball need, turf fields, which was not part of the master plan, because again, they looked at it from more of, hey, in 2030, we're going to have so many people in SCAPUS. We recommend, you know, 53 acres of parkland, and we currently have 19. But it didn't look at the sports that we thought we needed, or where we had deficiencies, pickleball, for instance. So just from that egg of the deficiencies in the sporting needs, I think is a big part of what we need to accomplish.
Absolutely. Any additional comments? Okay. And I also have that, that's also a great task for us, is to begin to not just, you know, we've kind of tackled sports needs of the teams that are here. And then the type of fields that people would like to have, or type of sports fields that people would like to see in Grabhorn. But again, I would agree that could be also a next task, is beginning to dive deeper into overall, like, what kind of sports are people in SCAPUS participating in from all age ranges? And are we meeting the needs of those in our parks? Okay. Any additional comments or questions? Okay. All right, we are going to move on at this point. Huel, if you don't mind speaking about Joel's email regarding the 90 acres at the airport.
Okay, so I did reach out to city planner Lori Oliver Joseph on this one. Again, it was when I saw that email come through, it was the first I had heard of it. Apparently well, I can read it for those who haven't had the chance to look at that email that Kara forwarded on to folks. I just don't want to misspeak. This is technical land use stuff. So in response to potentially having Air Park Development, who they're the owners of the industrially zoned land located south and east of the airport, that may have increased floodplain on their property as a result of the letter of map revision, donate their land for park space. That is unlikely at this time. Air Park seems to be committed to seeing what possibility there is to complete additional analysis of their site. To understand the proposed floodplain mapping might show less of the land within the 100-year floodplain. City planner had also stated that this is an ongoing issue that does not have a conclusion yet, and the revised floodplain maps would likely not be approved or official for several more years. It is also important to note that the Cathead Park land is the land that Air Park is donating to the city for park space once the plat for the industrial subdivision is recorded. Sorry, it sounded. I mean, I know I was reading that verbatim, but
Thank you, Huel.
It's a bit technical for me.
Would anybody like to does anybody have questions or comments regarding Huel's statement?
I'd like to comment. So, and this came about, I was talking to Joel about this, but, through all our findings with the citizens and the sports groups, we know that we need a lot more fields in Scappoose. And not only do we need more fields, we need different kinds of fields. We need turf fields, all-weather fields, lighted fields. So, if you look at the Grabhorn property by itself, we may be able to fit on 2 fields there. It's unknown if we could do turf fields there. It's unknown if we could do, night fields there. We have yet to talk to the neighbors on the west side if they're how they would feel about, lighted fields with games going till late at night, probably all year long. And, if you look at other places or other towns, they usually have a sports complex. It's not usually pushed into a park. It's actually a sports complex with, probably 5 fields. It usually has tons of parking. It's set up for tournaments, et cetera. And, maybe Scappoose only has this small amount of space and we can only fit it in Grabhorn. But at the same time, there might be other opportunities for really meeting the sports needs of the community. This is where Joel said he was in a meeting with the FEMA guys and the floodplain, and the floodplain had been updated to, if the curve, like basically the curve of the road, of the new road that's not open, it'd be on the inside of the curve. The current Cathead property is on the outside. It's a small parcel, and it actually is shaped like a cat. That's why it's called Cathead, I believe. But that's a much larger parcel. So he just had the idea, hey, we don't know anything about this, but maybe we could look into it because it might not be buildable. Of course, we have no idea, and as you said, it could take some time. But I guess my bigger question is if we compartmentalize these problems and solve them one at a time, that might not be the best idea. If we could look at the bigger picture, maybe we might come up with some other ideas. That was my thought process as a committee, to just talk about it here and get it out to the public as well, because there might be some other ideas about other larger parcels that could become a sports complex, which I know would fit the needs of the sports community.
Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if that were to become an option, I think that would be a fabulous option, but I don't think we can continue to defer the needs of some specific sports like soccer and softball in the hopes that that land is developable or appropriate for the sports field. I feel like the need is great enough that we can absorb an improvement potentially to Grabhorn and an addition of a sports field potentially down the road. And just personally having gone through a letter of map amendment for a property to get out of the floodplain, that can take a year. So I could imagine like this process truly could take 2 to 3 years. And I would hate to not be able to get something in the works to meet the needs of the community now.
Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, it's an interesting prospect and all that, but quite frankly, it's something for the future, and we're talking a period of years. And right now, I don't see it as having any impact on this committee's considerations.
My only thought to that is that, we just kind of cracked the egg on figuring out how many these great needs for fields, and we haven't really looked elsewhere for fields. And I wasn't saying that we would, extend it forever, but another idea, is perhaps we set up a small subcommittee to look for 2 months or 3 months and work on this, find other options. And if we find nothing, or we might find, hey, that area of property is something, but it is slated for 2030. But if we just drop it, we're not looking, we're not thinking big. And my fear is that we just stop thinking about it, because it's not going to just pop into our lap. So anyway, what my suggestion would be is, if anyone's interested, I know I am, to continue, maybe work in a smaller group, and maybe we can find some other options that could be creative and give us a time period. And if nothing happens, well, then we just, we learn something, and then we could work concurrently.
I know that the city engineer is not currently here, but he has spoken to the fact that he had been looking for a very, very long time for a space for a soccer field, and was unable to really locate a good piece of property within GPAHC that was appropriate. So I would love for a giant piece of property to show up where we could do a fantastic sports complex. But these things just, they take so much time. Cathead, we've been talking about Cathead for a long time. It originally we were hopeful that it could be our sports complex. And just now, after all this time, we just found out that it's mostly wetlands and not appropriate for anything other than like a natural space. And so I would agree with Kim and Jim that we've been putting off the needs of our soccer team and our softball teams for a long time now. And I would like to make a decision for them tonight. In regards to the turf and lights, Brian Hogue asked a contractor who builds sports fields to come and assess Grabhorn just to look at it and see what he thought was appropriate. And Brian, feel free to jump in. This contractor, this is what he does. He builds fields for a living, for schools, for cities. He absolutely felt like a soccer field and a softball field could go in this space. He had options for environmentally friendly turf, including, there's so many new turf options, including, instead of rubber pellets, they have olive pits and just several different biodegradable options. He discussed potential options for making sure we are protecting the watershed, including he went way more technical than I expected, but when they're looking at this, they are looking holistically at the space to make sure that they are protecting the areas. They also discussed the new lights. And lights, they have technicians who actually kind of calibrate the lights to minimize as much as possible light pollution. So I would agree that these are very valid concerns, and I think more information needs to be vetted, but they're actively working to get fields in these communities and attempting to minimize the frustration of the neighbors as much as possible. So just for what it's worth, I felt like that was valuable information. Ryan, did you want to speak up? Oh.
Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I don't have the opportunity to raise a hand. This is Mary. I have a question. Can I ask it real quick?
Absolutely.
Okay. My question is, so we talked about having a relationship or a partnership with the schools, which would be amazing. My question is, if we had a good partnership with the schools, how much would be alleviated? You know, if we were able to use their sports field, how much would that alleviate, you know, our need? Or I guess what I mean is, how much of our need would be met by having a good partnership with the schools?
I will have Brian speak to that.
So I think developing a relationship with the school district is a great idea, and I think that's something we definitely need to do to look forward for future building and things. I think in reality, and this is my opinion from experience over the last 10 years of dealing with the school, yes, we can have a relationship and they can give us access to their facilities. But if you're looking at the varsity or JV facilities of the high school, which is really what we're looking at, the ability to actually use it, even if they allow us to, is really minimal, especially in the fall and early spring when our baseball and soccer seasons are, because the high school uses those fields. And since they're not lighted, by 5:30, 6 o'clock, it's too dark for anybody else to go out and practice. You might get a half hour in, but you're not getting full practices. So, I mean, yes, it's great that they may give us more access to them. But I think we need to be realistic that access at that time would still be around the high school schedule, which would leave our availability to that be very limited. So that's kind of my point on that I want to talk about is, or that I wanted to get across is that, you know, it sounds really good, but we also have to be realistic about it. They're not turf fields, so they're not lighted fields. So we're really running in the same situation we are now, that we're still trying to share access and get access around the high school, and we're continuing to get bumped off those fields because high school games get rescheduled. So, you know, we have teams coming from out of the area for games. We have to reschedule. It's quite complicated not having a dedicated field for our softball program. And I know soccer deals with the same thing. There are also shared fields. So the JV softball field shares with soccer. So that means in the fall season during soccer, softball can't use it. Vice versa in the spring. The soccer fields share with the softball fields. So when softball is using them, soccer can't use it. So we still don't have a dedicated place for our soccer teams to practice that doesn't interfere, that they can play in all their seasons, or a softball field that we can play in all their seasons.
Okay. And one more question.
This is Rocky, Mary. I think that's a great question, Mary, that you said, and I would agree with you. It's very minimal that we're going to get a pickup by teaming up with the schools overall.
What is that field? What is the field used for? The one that's over beside the middle school? I don't know that I ever really see, not the one behind it, you know, where they play rugby and football, but the one beside it. What is that one ever used for? Does anybody ever know?
That's the varsity soccer field, and they don't let youth teams practice on that because that field, or very limited access to that, because that field does not take wear and tear. So they're trying to avoid a situation like we have with our football team, where we can't do home playoff games on our own local fields. We have to travel for our home games because by the end of our season, our grass fields are so torn up that OSAA doesn't allow us to play on those fields anymore. So they really restrict access on those things. And we're running the same issue with football, where they're now telling the youth football program that they won't be able to have anything on the high school field after the beginning of October. So all our youth football games for the second half of our season will all have to be away games because we won't have anywhere to play. So.
Okay, thank you.
And it's a safety issue from OSAA, honestly. It's them telling us that their fields aren't safe.
Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I would ask Rocky. Oh, sorry, was it Jim or Kim? Jim, go ahead.
Kim, you had your hand raised first.
Go ahead, Kim.
So I guess Brian and Rocky, what would be the opportunity to look at maybe a more regional sports complex? So I think, Rocky, the Scappoose Soccer Club has now become kind of merged with St. Helens. Is that correct?
We have, yes.
That notice? Okay. And I know, like, I coached my son's basketball team a couple years ago, and that's merged with St. Helens. You know, do we have the population to necessarily support a big complex for youth sports, or do we need to look more regionally, and what's the potential opportunity for that?
So I'll go. This is Rocky. So I do think that is a great idea. I mean, look at it regionally, not just in GPAHC. So as we mentioned early on, you know, when I talked, we teamed up with churches. I mean, we found that the churches were more easier to work with, and very excited to have members of the community come to their facilities with the potential of enlisting in, you know, checking out the church. So that was a great partnership for us. And they're interested in taking money to improve the fields, and we were interested in giving as much money as we could to improve the fields. So I think I'm answering your question by saying I think there is other areas we could look at, because it's not that far. 7 miles to St. Helens is not far. We did merge with them because their program had some failure. They were looking to make it, you know, bring more kids to the community to play and kind of merge together.
Was that all, Rocky?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say, you know, on that note, maybe there's a part, you know, while we're trying to, Parks Committee is meeting with schools, maybe there's an opportunity to meet with some churches as well. You know, they have, some of these churches have some very large fields that are unimproved. And we drive by them by the boat place there in GPAHC. They've got a lot of area, and there's other churches as well that have a lot of area that probably would love to potentially improve them if there were some funds available or some support in maintaining that. That's the key to maintain.
That's good. I'll add that, Rocky, to our future discussions.
Is there any sort of like governing authority that we would even talk to about, you know, I guess public lands that are county owned, or you know, ways that we could kind of merge the programs, which seem to already be naturally happening for some of these sports between St. Helens and GPAHC. So again, we're not just trying to, you know, solve all of our issues within the boundaries of GPAHC.
Huel, do you have any insight on that?
In terms of the county and recreational assets, the only thing I can think of that the county is very heavily involved in is the much larger regional parks, and which I'm not super aware of those in Columbia County. The other big asset that the county manages is the rest of the CZ Trail west of Highway 30. But in terms of being a regional player or participant in some sort of partnership about athletic fields or space for athletic fields, that remains to be seen. So
I think that's something that we can continue to investigate as well. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a wet blanket, but again, I think we're getting kind of far-fetched from dealing with Grabhorn at the moment. And I don't mean that to be discouraging in any regard to some of these options that should definitely be pursued. I'm glad to hear you doing it. As far as Grabhorn and going back to Brian and the softball folks, I was impressed by the information that you presented as far as your organization and all of the kids that are involved, and the obvious need that has been made pretty clear over the past few weeks, past couple of months, for a dedicated softball field. And quite frankly, I'd like to suggest that that be a priority for the committee for Grabhorn. And I know along with that, we've basically been looking at two fields, primarily the softball field and a soccer field. And of course, we can always use another soccer field. There's plenty of use for that. My concern is that right now, if this is our last meeting, that we deal with Grabhorn.
Yes, so I would agree. Great comment. Paul has a comment. No. I guess I have one last thing is before we, unless we have no more comments, is
Kara,
we're not talking. Yes.
this is Brian. So I just wanted to follow up on the lights question that we kind of got sidetracked. You originally asked me about that based on our discussion with the contractor. And the lighting systems that they use now inside municipal and city areas are not like the lighting systems are old, where they just flood the entire area and you have a lot of light pollution. They're very direct focused lights that are specifically pointed in certain spots. And if you go and visit, just for an example, Milwaukee School District just built a brand new softball and baseball field right in the middle of a community in Milwaukee. And there it's turfed and lighted. And when you go there, if you're 100 yards away from the field, you can't even tell that the lights are on. They do a really good job of stopping any light pollution from coming to your outside areas outside of the park. They're just very focused, tight beamed lights that work really well at not over stimulating the area with light. So that is a concern. I completely understand that the neighborhoods are going to be concerned about lights, but we also need to kind of understand that it's not the lighting systems of old. The technology has advanced quite a bit from, walking by our high school football field and seeing those lights from, a half a mile away. It's not that way anymore.
As a professional theater bum, I can assure you that light can't be controlled.
I just have one more comment regarding the fields. The one thing that we haven't really talked about in regards to these fields is that adults play softball and adults play soccer. So
Sure.
While it would be really fantastic to have a city-owned field for the sports team use, it would also be great to have a city-owned field because there'd be potential for adults to be able to play pickup games of soccer, have a softball league. So that might be something that we haven't really talked about that might also be very exciting for Scabs.
And sorry, one more thing. And to piggyback off of that, putting turf and lights into that field increases that use 10 times, right? Or tenfold, because you can use it year round. You can use it after 6 o'clock in October, November, December. We put brand new fields in. With that, if we go dirt with no lights, you're really limiting the access. You're limiting it to the summer months of being able to use it. That you're taking away your late fall, winter, and early spring. And to me, that would be, kind of a shame to waste that property to put something that's very limited in our availability overall.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about the sports fields that some of the school sports fields, some of them are often unusable because they are only grass. So it is something that I think we should, if we're going to take the time to do the fields, then we should take the time to see if turf is appropriate for this area.
As someone who deals with or has for a number of years dealt with the winter effects on the park properties over there, it turns into soup. It's silt. It's old river bottom and whatever else, and it would make a huge difference. I'd love to turf the dog park. Believe me. Because if you go to the dog park in the winter, you're going to be washing a dog.
Thank you, Jim. All right. I would like to move on to voting. Do we have any more questions or comments? Okay. All right. Well, let's go. So here's what we're going to do. We are going for a majority vote. So the ayes will have it. We're voting with with people on phone calls, so I can't necessarily see. So if it seems to be a mix of ayes and nays, we will do a roll call vote. So let's go ahead and get started. So we were originally tasked with finding the amenities. I feel like we have the info that we need. It was recently discussed that we wanted to really, the majority of the people wanted to say no to the road. So that's where I'm going to start. And so do we have a motion to say that we want to say no to a road or emergency egress?
I move that we suggest to the council that the road has no place in the park, is damaging to every and any other plans, and should be eliminated from consideration. There are other better options.
Do I have a second?
This is Rocky. I would second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, the second vote will be that the dog park stays where it is. Do I have a motion?
Do we have to ask if there's any opposed?
Yes. Are there any opposed with the road? Thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay. Second motion is that the dog park stays where it is. Do I have a motion to adopt?
Question first, if I may. I would like to add the possibility of expanding the park at some future point if it's available and feasible at the existing site.
I think that would be well supported by the community. I have a motion to adopt the dog park stays at Veterans with the possibility of expansion if there is the space available.
So move.
Second.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Do I have any opposition? Motion is carried. Okay, I'm going to, I'll start with just a softball field, and then I will go for a vote with turf and lights. Do I have a motion to incorporate a softball field into Grabhorn Park?
I'll motion to incorporate a softball field into Grabhorn Park.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Do we have anyone who opposes? Do I have a motion? Okay, the motion is passed. Do I have a motion to say that we would like to have a softball field with turf and lights be incorporated into Grabhorn?
I'll motion to include a softball field with potential for turf and lights if feasible.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Have any opposition?
I do. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't know how it was phrased. We just haven't really looked into it that deeply. It sounds like we've done some preliminary work. I think I'm all for it, but I don't think we can say we're going to do it without, a little more work. And also, we don't know costing yet.
Yeah.
This may push us a lot, it'd be much more than we expected. So I just want to put that caveat in there somehow.
We can say we'd like to have cost of turf and environmental impact evaluated.
Whatever. I just think that I think it's a great idea. I'm all for the idea. Just that we as a group haven't done a lot of work in that area yet. It sounds like there's been some nice preliminary work, but maybe this company has got some costing. We haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
He didn't have costing. He didn't have a budget for us, but he specifically worked. He had some really good ideas about how to make it budget friendly and incorporate turf and field.
We may get to the point though. We need to make some decisions. So that's why I'm just
absolutely.
I
think that's important.
I think Brian's phrasing was if feasible.
Yeah, I was going to say I added the words "if feasible" into my motion. So I didn't say for sure. I said it, if feasible, because I understand that cost and environmental issues and things all have to be considered. But I think we need to put it forward that we need to at least be looking at the possibility of doing that.
Okay, I can also, I will have my report for the, with all these things kind of verbatim sent out to the entire group before my city council meeting, and then everyone can evaluate my wording and we can modify as needed to if I miss something. Jim, you were next.
And we're not saying this is what's going to happen. This is just our recommendation. That's our
Correct.
job.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, just for clarity, listening to your vote, you're only talking about a softball field. The initial plan that the city proposed out there was a combination soccer softball. Is that what you're talking, or are you going to be voting for soccer at a later point throughout this? But I just for clarity, I guess, of the discussion.
Soccer is next.
Yeah, okay. with the elimination of the pool, there's enough room to put a soccer and a softball field separate that they don't have to share.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
So as long as it's feasibility and budget constraints, then I definitely agree.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
I do not oppose. I definitely agree.
So I just said softball with turf and lights if feasible, and we'd like to ensure, of course, that cost and environment is evaluated prior to. So do I have a motion to adopt that as written?
Motion to adopt.
I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Then do I have any opposition? Okay. All right, on to soccer. Do I have a motion to incorporate a soccer field into the Grabhorn parcel?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Motion is passed. Do I have a motion to incorporate a soccer field with turf and lights with the same, if feasible, with cost and environment evaluation, to incorporate into the Grabhorn field?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Do I have any
Aye.
opposition? Okay, the motion is passed. Okay, the next thing that I had on here was basketball. We haven't spoken a ton about it. It is something that has regularly come up. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix because it is, again, something that people have requested. Do we want to have any discussion before we vote on that before we go?
So this is Rocky. So is this that concept we did in the parking lot type concept, or is this a whole nother area?
Right. We didn't spend as much time discussing this.
Okay.
So we could say if there's potential. There was also a lot of it was something that we hadn't addressed, so I wanted to make sure that we addressed it tonight.
Okay.
There was also a lot of people who wanted some more open space. And so we would really need to make that decision is, would we prefer an extra basketball court, or we would like to have some field open for open space?
Are we talking a full court or a half court?
I mean, that's up to this group.
I think we need to do a full court. There's no full court in town. There's a few.
Well, if you do the double court, you get that has the pickle. That was the pictures I showed with the pickleball and stuff in there.
Oh.
Remember, I had pricing of the pickleball, the full court, and there was something else. I think it was another 3 things that it could be in the deal. Maybe it's volleyball.
Then we get basketball and pickleball.
But it had to be a double court size to do that.
Makes sense.
Do we have room to do that plus a softball field plus a soccer field and not take up parking? Because I couldn't see parking being triple utilized, right?
Right.
At that time, I didn't get into those details. We were just looking at where could we put it. We weren't looking at where we could put it. It was more, let's get pricing, budget, and ideas. Is it possible?
I'd suggest that we could certainly recommend looking at the feasibility of adding a combination basketball and pickleball court. in available park property there, which isn't necessarily strictly Grabhorn. I mean, it's all going to be one big park, but certainly we could recommend it looking at an addition of that as well, if there is space for it.
Would we like to have a caveat that that would be something that we would like to prioritize, like softball and soccer, and if there is room for parking and space, then we would like to add that?
A secondary priority?
Yes.
Can I mention something about parking?
Yes.
It has been expressed to me that even without the road, there's going to have to be parking in that area. I would suggest that it is very easy to put nose-in parking along Smith Road on that side of the park. We can take some of the parking that's in this parking lot that exists now, which will be in the center of the entire facility, and designate it for ADA parking. And that solves both issues without, again, running a road into the park and utilizing park space unnecessarily.
Okay. So I think that's a great idea, Jim, and I would like to add that in. Let's vote on basketball, pickleball, and I'll just go ahead and say as a secondary priority, as long as everybody agrees. Go ahead, Monica.
I just wanted to comment on the parking, because it's going to be really important to have sidewalks on EJ Smith. So I'm not sure that the nose-in parking directly off of EJ Smith is going to be ideal. So I just wanted to mention that.
Well, walking paths and paths for people in wheelchairs and whatever other necessary facilities are certainly part of the plan anyway. That's always been a consideration.
I don't think we're engineers here.
No.
I think we should specify that there should be some parking on the EJ Smith side.
Okay.
And then after they lay it out, we already know that because of the floodplain that you could put some parking down where the existing house is. And that would be probably the safest place for parking because there's unusable elsewhere.
Right.
I don't think we should try to solve it here.
Okay, that sounds good. Monica, do you have that?
Sorry, again, this is Mary, and I'm on my phone, so I can't raise my hand, but I have a quick question. Regarding the basketball court, where was that in terms of the priorities that were identified by the community? Was that high amongst the priorities, or yeah?
It was initially in the top 5. So pickleball and basketball, disc golf, tennis courts, they were all high priority for the citizens. And then basketball came up again as has pickleball.
Okay.
And yeah. Okay, I'm gonna put this to a vote. So do I have a motion to adopt a combination full court basketball / pickleball court as a second priority, provided we have parking and space?
So moved.
Motion to adopt.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Do I have any opposition? Okay, the motion is passed.
This is Mary again, and I'm not opposed to it, but I would like to make sure that it's a dual purpose type. I mean, if it's possible for it to do dual purpose, then it would be nice for it to be used that way.
That is going to be in my recommendation. That is specifically dual purpose for basketball and pickleball. Okay. All right. Motion is carried. All right. We are on to the trail. We'll just go with the trail. Do we have a motion to incorporate a trail into the Grabhorn parcel?
I motion to incorporate a trail into the Grabhorn parcel.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do I
Aye.
have any opposition? Okay, Motion is passed. Okay, there were several pieces for the trail. We have benches and picnic tables. Many people in the post forum survey said that they would love to have picnics there. There is workout options and there are playground options. So we can vote on each individual one. That might be a lot. Do we have concerns that might be too much, or would we like to try to incorporate all three?
I would suggest that if you have general park amenities such as benches, picnic tables, you just, you know, that can fit under like a general amenities.
General amenities, okay. Okay. So then we just have workout and playground. And we have talked about kind of like a natural as possible and also ADA accessible. Would we like to vote for both of those, to incorporate both of those? I'd like to hear feedback before I put it to a vote.
So Kim here, I would say maybe we're not overly prescriptive at this point. We just say that there are, you know, features for all ages along the trail or throughout the park.
All ages and activities.
That sounds great.
It seems to me that adding exercise equipment, you know, along the trail, I don't know that it's going to take up an inordinate amount of space to do that. You know, and it's, I think that that's doable without taking up space, a lot of space that could be used for something else.
Okay.
I think it would be really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I would add that, I mean, having grown up around a trail like that, it kind of is all ages, right? Like kids get up on the balance beams, kids do the monkey bars and the pull-up bars and all of that, just like adults. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I like how Kim worded it, that we say that we would like to have amenities along the trail that are appropriate for all abilities and all ages.
Yeah, I like how that's worded. That looks at the inclusiveness of it.
Do I have a motion to adopt that we have amenities options for all abilities and ages included in this parcel?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay, the motion is passed. All right, it is 7 o'clock. So we are, I would say we probably have about, I'm hoping not too much longer. So I'd like to just finish up and continue this. So do I have a motion to adopt that we extend the meeting?
Motion to adopt.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Motion is passed. We will continue. All right, well, great. Signage. So the number, the number one, based off of the post public forum survey, was that we had signage that said people wanted to know the plants and animals that they could see around. Now there was some people who they loved all of the signage options, that we had information regarding the plants and animals around, that we had information on how to identify plants, that we had information regarding why wetlands are important and the role of that particular creek in the overall watershed. So I would also like some discussion on this to see how would we like just one sign, or would we like signs that incorporate all of these things? Because people did like them. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I would say this is another opportunity to maybe not be overly prescriptive, right? Like if we had a sign that had a QR code that someone could wave their phone over, that gave all that other information, that could be an option, right? Like we don't have to have it necessarily all like hard printed right there. Maybe just have other ways to access it.
Okay.
So maybe signage that somehow enables people to access that information rather than containing it in total.
It might be nice though if there's like a unique plant or something that's kind of unique to that area. It would be nice to have just a little something there. I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge You know, the one in Veterans Park that we have is quite nice, but I don't think that we would need to have something like that, like along the trail, right? You could just have a little something saying the name of a plant or whatever. And then I like the idea with the QR code. If you want to know more about it, you know, look it up. But I've seen it done in a lot of different ways, and it's kind of nice, you know. It's like, oh, okay, so that's a whatever, you know, cool.
Nicole, do you have any thoughts on this? This is your area.
Yeah, so as far as the QR code goes, that excludes anybody from accessing the information that does not have a phone with them. And it also means that the city needs to maintain the web link and that web page. I think that it's something that would be short-term gains and long-term loss, potentially. I also think that the intent of putting the types of information that could go on there was just a way to signal to the public that there are a variety of information that could go onto these signs. I think it would be appropriate to, like Kim was saying, to just say that, yes, we should have some sort of interpretive information along the trail to help people better understand how they fit into the larger watershed and why this park is special.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, in terms of access, I would just say that there is a federal precedence already. It's the USDA and the GMO labeling initiative. They have said that digital links are sufficient in terms of conveying information. So from an access perspective, I don't know if we have to necessarily be concerned with that.
Thank you, Kim. So we could just put that we would like to see interpretive signage along the trail and not be too specific.
I think that would be sufficient.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt that we include interpretive signage along the trail.
Adopt.
I have a second.
Second.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Do you have any opposition? Okay. That is the last thing that I have to vote on. We'll vote on this as a whole. But is there anything that we are missing? Anything that we have? Yes, Paul.
Yeah, I heard opposition quite a bit from about paving the upper lot in the initial plan. That field is used, most hours of the day by, people, dogs, whatever, as a grassy field. In fact, they just put irrigation there. It seems like an unneeded expense, and you're taking away some natural open space. And we haven't talked too much about it in the plan, but I know we met with the citizens that it was something that they were not in favor of. I can't speak for all citizens, of course, but the ones I talked to.
Okay. Can Jim go ahead?
Quite frankly, I would consider that a safety improvement over the existing parking on Roger Cusera Road, particularly when all of those cars happen to be around and all those families and kids are there, and it is dangerous to drive through there, particularly since most people don't recognize that 10 miles an hour is in fact moving.
Okay. Do we have any other? So this is also kind of like outside the scope of Grabhorn. So is there anybody who would like to? But if there are people who have strong opinions about it, I would like to make sure that's included if we need it.
Maybe we should just table the whole thing now, because the original idea was around the through road.
Okay.
Maybe we can come back as the Parks and Rec Committee, and anyone's, of course, welcome to continue discussion around parking on the side of the road versus not, and then adding the parking lot, and also how it's going to work in with the whole plan of, Veterans North or whatever, Grabhorn property.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's
And
something.
given now that has irrigation and the potential for some nice grass in that area, you know, how could that space be used for some of the ideas that came up? You know, the priorities from the citizens. You know, like the disc golf or something like that. You know, could that space be used for that now that we have, you know, decent grass? I mean, we have some open green spaces that really aren't being used for anything. You know, how could we put them to use?
I think those are excellent questions that we can begin to tackle with the Parks and Rec Committee. Okay. Any additional questions, comments, concerns? Okay. I'm gonna kind of reread through this. So we would like to say that the road is a major interference with the park, and we would like that to say no to the road and any emergency egress. We would like to say yes. We would like to keep the dog park where it is, with the possibility of expansion if there is space. We would like to say yes to a softball with turf and lights, provided if feasible, after cost and environment has been evaluated. We'd like to say yes to soccer with turf and lights if feasible, as long as budget and environment are evaluated. We would like a combo basketball, pickleball court as a secondary priority if there is enough space in the field and parking. We would like to have everyone consider, or the city consider, parking on E.J. Smith. We would like along the trail. We voted yes on a trail. We would like amenities that were appropriate for all abilities and all ages along the trail. And we would like interpretive signage along the trail. Do I have a motion to adopt that as written, so that we can submit that to City Council?
I'm sorry, did you also mention that there might be additional parking necessary?
You know, that was written down. We didn't actually vote on that, so I can take that out. Do we want to vote on parking down E.J. Smith, or do we save that?
I think maybe we should just say is that, and with the amenities that can fit on, we'll work on the parking needs. The parking needs will include everything that we just talked about. I mean, because if it's two fields and plus another one and everything else, I mean, we're going to have some places to park, but it's going to be a puzzle, right?
Right. But also, I
specify E.J. Smith. I mean,
okay.
That's all I'm saying is that we need to,
right.
The engineer will need to work that out.
The engineer will work that out. So let's scratch that. So let's say so all of what I just read.
The only consideration there is that we don't want to have traffic into the park that is going to eliminate the space that we're getting rid of, or that we're making accommodations for by suggesting the road be gone. In other words, we don't want to put a parking lot in the middle of the park and eliminate space that can be used for these amenities that we're trying to put in place.
Do we want to comment on parking at all in our recommation? Do we or do we want to generalize?
I'd suggest that we simply say that while we recognize the need for additional parking, we encourage them to see that it doesn't affect the usable space of the park itself as much as possible.
Okay.
And also doesn't interfere with the 80 foot or whatever, how many feet it is away from the trees, that issue too. The issue with the trees on the LeBlanc.
That's what we're trying to avoid is moving into the park with parking.
But I think it is important to specify parking, because that increases access to the park for people who don't live necessarily adjacent to the park, which is also going to be critical for the grant, right? If we apply for the grant.
Okay, so we can specify it. Monica, go ahead, and then I'll read what I have written.
Well, I live up EJ Smith, so I am walking down that road often, and there's no shoulder at all. People have to walk on the street, literally. And then cars kind of swerve out of the way to the other lane so that people can be safely walking by. So the safety of that road is not great as it stands. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about a sidewalk, at least from, you know, First Street to EJ Smith, or First Street to the park, and that the parking lot needs to be within the park somewhere, you know, at the edge, but not along the street, because there's nowhere to put that. And the, you know, walking to the park is a problem as well.
Well, if you did put parking along EJ Smith, it would entail putting a curb and a sidewalk there for safety.
So yes,
you'd have to.
yeah.
Of course.
So what I have is we recognize a need for an additional parking. We would like to see that it doesn't affect usable space as much as possible, and to please keep in mind the critical root zone for the incense cedars. Do I have a motion to adopt that as written?
I motion it.
Do I have a second?
1 second.
And all in favor say aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
Okay. So that was the last piece of this. So I will just go through that again really quickly so we can all be clear on what we're voting on. We are voting that we don't want the road. We are voting to keep the dog park in place, possibly expand. Yes on softball, yes on turf and lights, yes on soccer, yes on turf and lights. Combo basketball, if there's space. Combo basketball, pickleball, the second priority. Amenities appropriate for all abilities and ages along the trail. Interpretive signage along the trail, and recognizing a need for additional parking. We'd like to see parking that doesn't affect usable space as much as possible, and keeping in mind the critical root zone. Do I have a motion to adopt that to be submitted into City Council?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay, the motion is passed. Woo.
Can we clap?
Yes.
Yay.
All right. Well, you guys, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I really want to, really, the way everybody showed up, this was really involved. There was, and I just feel like we really were able to hear a lot of people, and so many people were allowed to have the opportunity to speak in the public forum and public comment, and I think a lot of really good came out of it. Outside of this, I think that, for Parks and Rec, as everyone heard tonight, all of the ideas and all the momentum that we got, that is just going to pass right over into the Parks and Rec committee. I'm just excited about it. I think it's going to fuel our master plan. I think it's fueling our conversation with school districts, and even now potentially fueling collaborations with church fields, with the county. So I can't thank you guys enough. This was a pretty daunting task to begin with, and so I cannot show enough of my appreciation for everybody who showed up and supported this process.
Yeah, and I would just.
Yeah, I just have a question on, so what is the next steps? And especially, we now we have this puzzle, we've solved a bunch of pieces, but we've probably worked more than anybody else with regards to, I'm talking about the committee here. Will we be able to work more on the plan as it becomes, to beta and then to, alpha and then to finalized, and or is it just shipped off and then we're going to get something back?
I think that's a question for City Council to answer on that one.
I would like to see us involved in this process. So we can for sure make that recommendation.
Yeah,
Kim,
so I
did-
would just follow up on Kara's comments. When we were initially tasked with this, it seemed insurmountable. But I'm really pleased with everyone, that the city council chose and put into this process, because everyone really did do their part. And I would encourage you to stay engaged. Clearly, there's plenty of additional work, whether it's, engagement with the schools or the community, or looking, more regionally at options for recreation. So, as you can, please stay engaged as an informal citizen if it can't be in a formal capacity somehow.
Parks and Rec is looking for members. So
Yeah, actually, on that note, Ivy Freemuth has moved, so she let us know that she resigned from the committee last week. But there should be one full member position, and then we have another alternate, maybe two. So we'll be posting those in the days to come. So.
Okay, thank you, Hill. All right, any comments, questions, concerns before we end this meeting tonight?
I would just like to thank all of you for taking the input from the community as seriously as you have. And I've been quite surprised at just how much new information has come out since this all started, and all of the information that Parks and Rec is going to have to work with coming out of this committee's work. So really well done, y'all.
Absolutely. Anyone else? All right, everyone. Have a really good night. I hope to see everyone who's been a part of this show up to Parks and Rec meeting, try out. Or just attend. I'd love to see continued feedback, just like Kim said. All right, everyone. Have a really good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, you
Thank
too.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thank you.